My child. A moment ago, someone was ready to close a door they never thought they would touch again. Not tomorrow. Not someday. They believed the story was over. They convinced themselves that whatever existed between their heart and the thought of you had finally faded into silence. But listen carefully. Do not skip. Because what you are about to hear is not what they expected. And it is certainly not what you expected. There is something huge waiting for you. Something that began with a single sentence. One sentence. Just a few words. Yet those words struck with the force of 1,000 memories. And everything changed. The strange part? The person who spoke those words had no idea what they were setting into motion. They did not know they were awakening emotions that had been sleeping for months. Perhaps years. They did not know they were reopening a chapter that seemed permanently closed. But before that sentence was spoken, your soulmate had reached a breaking point. Not because they hated you. Not because they stopped caring. Sometimes people walk away not because feelings disappear. Sometimes they walk away because carrying those feelings becomes too painful. And that is exactly where they were. They told themselves they needed peace. They told themselves they needed distance. They repeated the same story again and again until they almost believed it. It is over. It is done. I have to move forward. Yet every time they tried to move forward, something kept pulling them back. A memory. A feeling. A moment. A voice. A small detail nobody else would understand. Still, they resisted. Still, they fought against it. Because they believed there was no reason to keep hoping. No reason to keep wondering. No reason to keep looking back. And then, something happened. Stay till the end. Because this is where everything begins. On a completely ordinary day, your name appeared unexpectedly. Not in the way you think. Not through some dramatic event. Not through some impossible coincidence. It happened quietly. Almost invisibly. The kind of moment most people would ignore. But not this time. Because hidden inside that moment was a sentence. A simple observation. A simple statement. Yet when those words reached their ears, time seemed to slow down. The sentence was this. You know, nobody ever made them feel the way you did. Silence followed. Not outside. Inside. A silence so deep that it echoed through every defense they had built. Every wall. Every excuse. Every reason for leaving. Suddenly they remembered things they had spent months trying to forget. The way conversations with you felt different. The way your energy stayed with them long after you were gone. The way certain memories still carried warmth. The way your presence seemed impossible to replace. And for the first time in a very long time, they stopped running. Do not skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Because what happened next shocked even them. They began asking questions they had avoided. Questions that frightened them. Questions that demanded honest answers. What if they left too soon? What if they misunderstood something important? What if the connection was real? What if the story was never supposed to end? These questions followed them everywhere. Through busy days. Through quiet nights. Through moments when they tried to distract themselves. The questions remained. Growing louder. Growing stronger. Growing impossible to ignore. And then another realization appeared. One they never expected. The more they tried to replace what they felt, the more obvious the truth became. Nothing felt the same. People came and went. Conversations happened. Life continued moving. But something was missing. Something irreplaceable. Something connected to you. Not because you were perfect. Not because life with you would be flawless. But because certain connections leave fingerprints on the soul. And no matter how much time passes, those fingerprints remain. That realization terrified them. Because accepting it meant admitting they had never truly moved on. Accepting it meant admitting that somewhere deep inside, you still mattered. More than they wanted to confess. More than they wanted to understand. And now, the sentence would not leave their mind. You know. Nobody ever made them feel the way you did. Again. And again. And again. Every repetition cracked another piece of the wall. Every repetition awakened another memory. Every repetition brought them closer to a truth they could no longer deny. A truth they had hidden even from themselves. The truth that your story was not forgotten. The truth that your presence never disappeared. The truth that their heart had been waiting for permission to remember. And that permission finally arrived. Stay till the end. Because the biggest shift has not happened yet. At this very moment, while they appear calm on the outside, something is unfolding beneath the surface. A battle between fear and hope. A battle between logic and emotion. A battle between leaving forever and turning back one final time. And for the first time, hope is winning. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Steadily. Powerfully. Like sunrise after a very long night. They are beginning to see things differently. Beginning to understand things differently. Beginning to question every conclusion they once believed was final. Because one sentence changed everything. One sentence reminded them of something their heart knew all along. And this is only the beginning. The next part of this story reveals what happened when they finally stopped fighting the truth. And the sign that appeared immediately afterward left them completely speechless. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. My beloved child. There is a moment in every story when silence becomes impossible. Not because someone speaks. But because the truth grows louder than every excuse. That is where your soulmate found themselves. The sentence that shook them awake refused to disappear. They tried to focus on other things. They tried to keep moving. They tried to convince themselves that nothing had changed. But something had changed. Everything had changed. And the more they fought it, the stronger it became. Stay till the end. Do not skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Because what happened next was not planned. It was not expected. And it was certainly not something they were prepared for. One evening, when the world around them seemed completely ordinary, a memory arrived without warning. Not a random memory. Not a blurry memory. A vivid memory. The kind that feels so real it steals your attention from everything else. They remembered a moment connected to you. A detail they thought they had forgotten forever. The sound of laughter. A conversation. A feeling. A look. Something small. Yet powerful enough to stop them in their tracks. And suddenly they realized something that frightened them. They could remember you clearly. Far too clearly. People are supposed to fade with time. Memories are supposed to lose their color. Feelings are supposed to weaken. Yet somehow, yours had not. That realization sent a shock through them. Because it forced them to face a question they had spent months avoiding. Why? Why was your presence still so strong? Why did your memory still carry weight? Why did thoughts of you still create emotion? The answers were uncomfortable. Because deep inside, they already knew. Some connections are not meant to disappear. Some people leave marks that time cannot erase. And you were one of those people. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Because the next realization hit even harder. As they reflected on everything, they began noticing something strange. Every path they had taken since walking away seemed incomplete. Every attempt to convince themselves that they had done the right thing suddenly felt uncertain. Every certainty became a question. Every answer became a doubt. And then another thought appeared. A dangerous thought. A hopeful thought. A life-changing thought. What if leaving was the mistake? The moment that question entered their mind, nothing remained the same. Because questions like that are powerful. Once they enter the heart, they do not leave easily. The question followed them everywhere. While working. While resting. While trying to sleep. While pretending everything was normal. The question remained. What if leaving was the mistake? And every day that passed made it harder to ignore. Something huge is waiting for you. Stay till the end. Because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. One day, completely out of nowhere, they heard another person talking about loyalty. A simple conversation. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing dramatic. Yet one sentence from that conversation struck them deeply. The person said, "Some people never realize the value of someone until they're gone." The words landed heavily. Because they were not hearing the sentence. They were feeling it. And in that moment, your face appeared in their thoughts again. Not because they forced it. Not because they wanted it. Because their heart immediately connected the message to you. The realization was impossible to escape. They had spent so much time focusing on distance that they forgot to focus on value. They had spent so much energy looking for reasons to leave that they never fully appreciated what existed before. And now the truth stood directly in front of them. Clear. Unavoidable. Powerful. You mattered more than they admitted. Far more. For a while they sat with that realization. Alone. Thinking. Remembering. Questioning. And then something happened that surprised even them. Instead of feeling fear, they felt gratitude. Gratitude for the memories. Gratitude for the connection. Gratitude that the feelings had not completely disappeared. Because if they still felt something, then perhaps the story was not finished. Perhaps there was still something left unsaid. Perhaps there was still a reason they could not let go. Do not skip. Because what happened next changed the direction of everything. The walls around their heart were beginning to crack. Not all at once. Slowly. But enough to let light enter. Enough to let truth enter. Enough to let possibility enter. And with every passing day, the image they had created of a future without you became harder to believe. Because every future they imagined seemed to contain a missing piece. And that missing piece always led back to the same person. You. The more they tried to avoid that conclusion, the more obvious it became. The heart had chosen. Long ago. Before the confusion. Before the distance. Before the silence. The heart had chosen. And now it was reminding them. Again. And again. And again. Something huge is waiting for you. Stay till the end. Because the next sign left them completely speechless. Just when they thought these thoughts would eventually fade, something happened that felt impossible to ignore. A coincidence. Or perhaps not a coincidence at all. A reminder appeared at exactly the right moment. A reminder connected to you. The timing was so precise. So unexpected. So perfectly placed. That they could not explain it. And for the first time, they stopped searching for explanations. Instead, they simply sat there. Feeling. Remembering. Understanding. Accepting. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. You were still part of their story. Not part of their past. Part of their story. And that realization changed everything. Because once the heart accepts the truth, a new question appears. Not, should I let go? Not, should I forget? But something much bigger. Something much more powerful. What should I do now? And that question is exactly where your soulmate stands at this moment. The answer is closer than they realize. The sign is bigger than they understand. And in the next part, you will discover the moment they finally stopped resisting, and the decision they secretly began making when nobody else was watching. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. My beloved child. There comes a point when a person can no longer hide from what their own heart is trying to tell them. Not because someone forces them. Not because circumstances demand it. But because the truth keeps appearing from every direction. That is exactly where your soulmate found themselves. The questions were no longer disappearing. The memories were no longer fading. The feelings were no longer weakening. Instead, they were growing stronger. Day after day. Moment after moment. Quietly. Powerfully. Relentlessly. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Because what happened next was the turning point. The point where everything began shifting. The point where the future started changing. One night, while everyone else seemed asleep, your soulmate found themselves sitting alone with their thoughts. No distractions. No noise. No excuses. Just silence. And sometimes silence is where the loudest truths appear. At first they tried to think about anything else. Tomorrow. Work. Responsibilities. Plans. But every road somehow led back to the same destination. You. Not because they forced it. Because their heart refused to travel anywhere else. And for the first time in a very long time, they stopped fighting. They stopped arguing with their feelings. Stopped running from their memories. Stopped pretending they were unaffected. Instead, they allowed themselves to be honest. Truly honest. And that honesty changed everything. Because the moment they became honest, a realization appeared. A realization so powerful it shook them deeply. They had not been trying to forget you. They had been trying to protect themselves. There is a difference. A very important difference. For so long they believed walking away was strength. They believed distance was protection. They believed silence was the safest choice. But now they were beginning to understand something surprising. Sometimes protection becomes a prison. Sometimes the walls we build to avoid pain also block happiness. And suddenly they could see those walls clearly. The walls they created. The walls they defended. The walls that kept them separated from what mattered most. Stay till the end. Do not skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Because this realization led to another. An even bigger one. They started revisiting moments they once misunderstood. Moments they had replayed hundreds of times. But this time they saw them differently. Not through fear. Not through doubt. Not through hurt. Through clarity. And clarity changed the entire picture. Things they once viewed as endings suddenly looked like beginnings. Things they once viewed as failures suddenly looked like lessons. Things they once viewed as reasons to leave suddenly looked like reasons to stay. The more they reflected, the more obvious it became. The story was never as simple as they believed. There were things left unsaid. Things left unexplored. Things left unfinished. And that realization stayed with them, following them through every day, every night, every quiet moment, until eventually they could no longer deny it. The connection was still alive. Maybe hidden. Maybe distant. But alive. And that truth brought both fear and hope. Fear because it meant they might have been wrong. Hope because it meant all was not lost. Do not skip. Because what happened next shocked even them. A strange feeling began appearing. A feeling they had not experienced for a very long time. Anticipation. Not certainty. Not confidence. Anticipation. The feeling that something important was approaching. The feeling that a chapter was preparing to open. The feeling that life was quietly arranging pieces behind the scenes. At first they ignored it. Then they noticed it again. And again. And again. Until eventually they had to admit something. Their heart was expecting something. Waiting for something. Watching for something. And somehow, that something always seemed connected to you. Something huge is waiting for you. Stay till the end. Because the next realization may be the biggest one yet. One morning they woke up with an unusual sense of clarity. No dramatic event had happened. No major announcement. No obvious sign. Yet they felt different. Lighter. Calmer. More certain. As if a weight they had carried for months had finally started lifting. And in that moment they asked themselves a question. A simple question. But one that changed everything. If I met them today, what would I say? The answer arrived immediately. Without hesitation. Without confusion. Without fear. Because deep down, they already knew. The answer had been waiting inside them all along. And the answer surprised them. They did not imagine arguments. They did not imagine blame. They did not imagine distance. They imagined honesty. Real honesty. The kind that comes from a heart that is finally tired of hiding. That realization touched something deep within them. Because it revealed how much they had changed. How much they had learned. How much they had grown. And for the first time, they stopped focusing on what went wrong. Instead, they started focusing on what could still be possible. The future. Not the past. Possibility. Not regret. Hope. Not fear. And that shift changed everything. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Because there is one detail they have not shared with anyone. One thought they keep returning to. One possibility they cannot stop imagining. The possibility of another chance. Not because they expect it. Not because they demand it. Because the thought simply refuses to leave. It appears when they least expect it. In quiet moments. In reflective moments. In moments when they are completely honest with themselves. And every time it appears, it feels stronger. More real. More possible. As if something unseen keeps guiding their attention back toward the same direction. Toward the same person. Toward the same connection. Toward you. Now they stand at a crossroads. One path leads back into silence. Back into distance. back into pretending. The other path leads toward truth, toward courage, toward possibility. And every day that passes, they seem less interested in the first path, and more curious about the second. That curiosity is growing. That hope is growing. That realization is growing. And in the next part, you will discover the moment a completely unexpected sign appeared right in front of them, a sign so specific, so perfectly timed, that it forced them to make a decision they never thought they would make. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. My beloved child. Sometimes the universe becomes so quiet that even the smallest sign feels impossible to ignore. And that is exactly what happened next. Not a storm. Not a dramatic interruption. Not a voice from the sky. Something far more powerful. Timing. Perfect timing. The kind of timing that makes a person stop and wonder if there is more happening behind the scenes than they can see. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Because the moment your soulmate reached the edge of a decision, something unexpected appeared. A reminder. A feeling. A connection. A sign that arrived at exactly the right moment. And what made it extraordinary was not what happened. It was when it happened. For days they had been asking themselves the same question. Should they continue pretending the connection no longer mattered? Or should they finally acknowledge what their heart had been trying to say all along? The question followed them everywhere. And then, just as they were searching for clarity, the answer began revealing itself. Slowly. Quietly. Powerfully. One detail at a time. At first they noticed familiar memories returning. Not painful memories. Not sad memories. The beautiful ones. The meaningful ones. The moments that survived every attempt to forget. The moments that remained alive despite the distance. And as those memories resurfaced, something surprising happened. Instead of creating confusion, they created certainty. Because certain memories only survive when they are attached to something real. Something important. Something unforgettable. And your soulmate was beginning to understand that. Stay till the end. Do not skip. Because the next realization changed everything. For the first time, they stopped asking whether they still cared. That question was already answered. Instead, they started asking a completely different question. What happens if they do nothing? The answer frightened them. Not because of what might happen. Because of what might never happen. Because suddenly they realized that silence has consequences too. Walking away has consequences too. Waiting forever has consequences too. And that realization created a feeling they could not ignore. A feeling of urgency. Not panic. Not pressure. Urgency. The awareness that some opportunities are too meaningful to leave unfinished. The awareness that some connections deserve honesty. The awareness that some stories deserve one more chapter. And once that awareness appeared, there was no going back. Something huge is waiting for you. Do not skip. Because this was the exact moment everything shifted. The fear that once controlled them began losing power. The doubts that once felt overwhelming began shrinking. The walls that once seemed impossible to break began cracking. And behind those walls was something they had hidden for far too long. Hope. Real hope. Not wishful thinking. Not fantasy. Hope rooted in truth. Hope rooted in feeling. Hope rooted in a connection they could no longer deny. Every day it grew stronger. Every day it became clearer. Every day it became harder to ignore. Until finally they reached a realization that changed the direction of their future. A realization they never expected. A realization they never planned. A realization they never thought they would accept. They missed you. Not the idea of you. Not a memory of you. You. Your presence. Your energy. The way you made certain moments feel different. The way you brought something unique into their life. The way your absence created a space nobody else could fill. And once that realization arrived, everything looked different. The past looked different. The present looked different. The future looked different. Because now they were seeing through the eyes of truth instead of fear. Stay till the end. Do not skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Because there is one final piece of this chapter. One final revelation. One final shift. As they reflected on everything, they began understanding a lesson that many people never learn. The most valuable connections are not always the easiest. The most meaningful journeys are not always the simplest. And the strongest feelings are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are quiet. Persistent. Patient. Waiting. Waiting until the heart is finally ready to listen. And your soulmate is listening now. More carefully than ever before. The silence is breaking. The confusion is fading. The truth is rising. And deep inside, they know something they could not admit before. Walking away forever is no longer the future they imagined. Because one sentence changed everything. One sentence reopened a door they thought was permanently closed. One sentence awakened emotions they believed had disappeared. One sentence reminded them of something their heart never truly forgot. You mattered. You still matter. And that truth has become impossible to ignore. Now they stand at the beginning of a brand new chapter. Not with all the answers. Not with complete certainty. But with something far more important. The willingness to stop running. The courage to face the truth. And the desire to discover what happens next. Because sometimes a story survives every obstacle for one reason. It is not finished yet. And in the next part, you will discover the decision your soulmate finally makes when they can no longer deny the truth. And why the moment that follows becomes one of the most unforgettable turning points of their entire journey. Do not skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you.